Stephen waited until the time was right before he left the research institute and put on an act, pretending to give orders to his subordinates to handle the aftermath of the explosion. The record was sent to the Military Administration Department's office for the staff to edit and process. When it was ready, it would be sent to the media to publicize. The United States' hit list was updated with Ezra and his group's names. Aside from Stephen, Dr. Dalton, and a couple of senior management officers, everyone else was kept in the dark. To deceive their enemy, they first had to deceive their own people. Dozens of helicopters from the military landed on the mountain where the Seven Stars prison was built. A dense crowd scattered through the forest to search for the prisoners. Stephen handed off the military to Dr. Dalton and the captain of the patrol team and left the excuses to them. The two of them were supposedly on the scene, and they'd witnessed the prisoners breaking out. There was no need for him to be there, so he found an opportunity to slip past the crowd back to Annapolis. Stephen found Kim waiting for him in front of the villa when his helicopter landed. He didn't think it was necessary to hide the truth from her, so he told her about Dr. Dalton's plan. Ezra and his group were skilled. On top of receiving help from the enemy, it was nearly impossible for the military to find them. Stephen's phone rang nonstop, and he was bombarded with endless messages detailing the bad news. It had been several hours since the prison break. The recording taken from the scene was the latest report, and the media didn't have an update for the public. Photos of Ezra and his group were displayed on TV, and a high bounty was issued. Most people believed it. "Are we still going to Cadiz tomorrow to meet the king and investigate the ghost ship?" Kim asked. "Or should we stay in the city and wait for results from the fake prison breakout?" "We'll leave tomorrow. It'll take some time for the enemy to reveal themselves." Speaking of the ghost ship, Stephen remembered the residents of Phantasma Isle. He made a mental note to pick up Ash and Rhett from the island tomorrow before heading to Cadiz. The next morning, a warship from the military set off from the port and passed through the island to pick up the two guests. Rhett could barely contain his excitement. He couldn't wait to see how much the world had changed. Ash was also excited, but he didn't forget to be cautious. "Is there something you need help with, Mr. Adams? We're good at fighting and killing. The others are too." Ash and Rhett's group had survived the ancient era. No matter how mediocre their aptitudes were in the present, they would eventually reach unimaginable heights after a certain period of cultivation. While they were trapped on Phantasma Isle at the bottom of the sea, the defensive array had restricted their potential. It formed a vacuum and limited the amount of spiritual energy on the island. They had tried to cultivate, but their progress was abnormally slow because of the restrictions. Now that they were on the surface, this was no longer the case. "It's nothing dangerous," Stephen replied with a smile. "I'm taking you two on vacation. Our hostile neighboring countries have suffered losses recently. They're not ready to start a war." At this time, Sawyer, the higher-up of Warhawk's parliament, and Walter, a diplomat from Maplewood, had become distinguished guests of Cadis's royal family. They didn't do anything at the palace except eat and drink. Their naval forces had been severely weakened, so they had no choice but to take on a passive-aggressive approach to pressure the king, Javon. First, they would build a friendly relationship, and then they would discuss trade with their 3 countries. Javon dismissed the musicians when the performance was over. "I know why you're here. I'm open to the idea of supporting Warhawk and Maplewood's businesses, but I'll need to discuss this with the sovereign." Walter frowned. Javon was the king of Cadiz. He couldn't even make a decision on his own? "You hold the sovereign in too high of a regard. Cadis's affairs shouldn't be decided by outsiders." Javon took a sip of wine. "Don't pretend like you're oblivious to the United States' military and navy. One word from the sovereign is all it takes for Cadis to be flattened." Walter and Sawyer had nothing to say to that. Warhawk and Maplewood's support for Cadis was limited by the vast ocean between their countries. Cadis was a neighboring country of the U.S., and the threat was very real. "Investing in a multinational company won't affect your relationship with the U.S., Sawyer suggested. "If the sovereign tries to stop us, we'll use public opinion to suppress him." They were interrupted when news of the sovereign's visit reached the palace. Everyone lost their appetite. Javon rushed to arrange a grand reception for him as Walter and Sawyer left before they could run into the sovereign. A luxurious convoy took Stephen, Kim, Ash, and Rhett to the palace. Ash and Rhett felt like they were dreaming. They'd never seen such a magnificent palace in their life. Phantasma Isle was limited in resources, and the buildings were simple. They never imagined a structure like this could exist. "You two don't have to speak during the discussion," Stephen said. "Be mindful of your manners. Our next stop is the port. You're free to act however you want when there's no outsiders around." Ash nodded solemnly. "We'll be quiet." "We'll focus on the food," Red added seriously. Javon personally welcomed them and led them into the hall. He had just finished socializing with Warhawk and Maplewood, and now he had to do it again with the Sovereign. Fortunately, Stephen got down to business after exchanging pleasantries. "Warhawk and Maplewood's delegation team were in Cadis for quite some time. What did you discuss?" "Nothing much," Javon said. "They were here to propose a joint business opportunity." "I see. International trade is important to every country. It'll be beneficial for everyone if you form a partnership." Doing business with Warhawk and Maplewood was reasonable, and Stephen wouldn't deny Cadis the opportunity just because they were enemies with the U.S. He was also planning to build an arena at Cadis's port. It would be a good source of revenue and raw materials for Dr. Dalton. Stephen placed his business proposal in front of Javon. During the recent martial arts competition, Cadis's royal family had opted to watch the live broadcast rather than attending in person. Every country understood the value of martial arts, and Cadis was no exception. Javon didn't hesitate to agree. Having martial artists engage in friendly spars would be great for tourism. Where would you like to hold them? How about the port? Stephen and Kim were surprised when he agreed so readily. "We'll have to do an inspection first," Stephen said. "I'll let you know after a few days." "Okay, I'll wait for your good news." As for information about the ghost ship, Javon didn't know anything about it. Big shots were visiting Cadis one by one, and the royal family didn't have time to look into it. The ghost ship was affecting trade between their countries, and they had to find a solution soon. Stephen and his group hurried to the five-star hotel at the port right after meeting with Javon. The captain and his crew from the United States' Maritime Defense Forces were staying there. Stephen called the captain to his room after settling the others at the hotel. "What's the latest update? Are you certain there's no crew on the ghost ship?" "Based on the footage from the recon satellites, we've confirmed there's no crew on the ship. We've seen birds land on the deck from time to time, but there's nothing unusual about them." "What about long-range artillery?" "It's not effective. There seems to be a magnetic field surrounding the ship. It interferes with our missile's navigation system." Stephen didn't believe in magic that couldn't be explained. The target of his suspicions fell on the island state. Their martial artists were proficient in water, and they had hidden conflicts with the U.S. He wouldn't be surprised if they were behind this. "I'll head out to sea to check on the ship. We can't keep wasting time like this." "I'll inform my crew to prepare for patrol," the captain said. "No, people will see us. I'll take the whale." Diving into the deep ocean with the whale was an experience Stephen would never forget. It was inconspicuous, and its defenses were high. Ash and Red had drunk a little too much wine during their meeting with Javon, so he would have to wait until tomorrow to discuss this with them. Early the next morning, the three of them gathered at the harbor. The whale was already waiting for them. They entered its stomach before anyone could spot them. The reconnaissance satellite transmitted the precise location of the ghost ship in real time. As the whale was sailing in its direction, Stephen finally had a chance to ask Ash and Rhett some questions. "The ghost ship appeared soon after we destroyed the defensive array at Phantasma Isle. This can't be a coincidence. What do you think about this?" Aerial photos of the ghost ship weren't much of a lead. The hull was corroded by water, and its original appearance had long disappeared. Ash wasn't sure, but he had a guess. During the war in the ancient era, the enemy launched an attack on Phantasma Isle. Their ships were docked on the shore. If the island sank with the enemy's ships, then one of them might have dislodged from the rocks and floated to the surface after the defensive array was broken. His explanation aligned with the timing of the ghost ship's appearance. There was an abundance of exceptionally sturdy resources in ancient times that weren't available now. If ancient martial artists collected these materials and used them to build a ship, that would explain how it survived thousands of years without being corroded by water. Rhett also had a guess. Powerful weapons imbued with the spiritual energy eventually give rise to their own consciousness. What if the ghost ship can operate without a crew because it has a mind of its own? Stephen thought it sounded far-fetched. The only way to confirm was to investigate the ghost ship up close. In the middle of the sea, the sunny weather turned into a storm of torrential rain. The visibility dropped significantly. Fog enveloped the ghost ship and obstructed the satellite's view. Stephen had to rely on his experience to roam the ocean in the Whale to search for the ship. Herman and Amanda were two members of Tempest Citadel who'd hired the Northern European and African teams. The Orcs were also under their command. They'd split into two groups after the competition. Herman's group went to the northeastern border to steal the sacred manual fragment from Miles, while Amanda's group stayed hidden on the ghost ship inside the cabin. There was enough dried seafood to last them a year and a half. When the ship sailed into the storm, the Orcs began to worry. "Miss Amanda, we'll be struck by lightning if we drift aimlessly on the ocean like this. The ship is on the verge of collapse. It won't last much longer." When Orcs weren't in battle, they typically remained in their human forms. They shifted into their beast forms during combat to increase their strength. "Are you scared of this little breeze? How pathetic." Amanda condensed her inner strength into black feathers on her palm. The wind carried them to the center of the storm. They acted as lightning rods and attracted electrical charges from the sky. When the feathers reached their limit, the lightning was released in a massive explosion that lit up the pitch-black ocean. Stephen, Ash, and Rhett, who were hiding in the whale's belly, sensed the aura of a powerful martial artist. Stephen sent a command to the whale, and it floated to the surface where a spectacular sight came into view through the perspective of the illusory pearls. "There really are people on the ship. They've been hiding in the cabin." "It won't be easy to take them down," Ash warned. "There's only 3 of us." He and Rhett were more concerned for Stephen rather than themselves. Stephen was the reason they had escaped an eternity at the ocean's depths, and they owed him their lives. The 2 of them had come to a secret agreement to be his bodyguards. "I know, we have to tread carefully," Stephen said. "We'll approach them slowly and assess the situation first." The whale dived into the ocean and made its way toward the ghost ship. As they went closer, Stephen realized that there was more than one ship. There were 3 in front of them and more in the distance. Their opponent had the advantage in numbers. Black feathers hovered in the sky. They resembled the vulture who'd tried to steal the prize during the competition. The young woman standing on the deck using the feathers to protect the ships. The Orcs were probably hiding in the cabin. Stephen had heard from Wes and Aston that Orcs could take on forms of beast and use their abilities. If the Orcs in the cabin could fly, it would be hard to chase after them. He remotely controlled the 7 gems. They crashed into the side of the waves of inner energy in the direction of the assailant. When the gems were hit, the clash triggered a series of explosions. The whale opened its mouth, spewing currents of water at the ships. They swayed back and forth, no match for the overlord of the sea. "That won't be enough to destroy the ships," Ash said. "They've been submerged in seawater for thousands of years, but they haven't decomposed or decayed yet. They might sink temporarily, but they'll eventually float back to the surface in one piece." Amanda casted an array around the ships. They sank into the ocean and traversed the waters like a submarine. Hiding in the sea rendered external attacks useless. "It doesn't matter. We'll deal with them at a later date." Stephen sent his gems after the ships. They drifted along the currents and flowed inconspicuously. When they returned to the hotel, Stephen received a call from the captain of the guards at the northeastern border. After days of intense conflict, the Tribulation sect had escaped their pursuers. Cardinal Miles and 2 of his teammates in black robes were the only ones who'd survived. They fled towards the north with the sacred manual fragment. Stephen didn't know what to say. He had to admit he was kind of impressed with the Tribulation sect. He wasn't there, but he could picture the massacre. Miles was skilled at using talismans. His explosions were one of the most destructive techniques during the competition. The northeastern guards had followed Miles and what was left of his team as far as they could, but they had to turn back right before they entered Scotty's territory. Not to mention, the snowy plains were a harsh and dangerous environment. It'd be dangerous to follow without backup. "Should we send a team to follow the Tribulation sect?" the captain asked. I suspect they're planning to expand their influence to the northeastern border. That got Stephen's attention. Have you seen them sneaking around near the border? Yes, they disguise themselves as merchants. Ever since they publicized the secret manual, ancient martial arts factions and powerful martial artists across the world had left their lives of isolation behind. Many of them had either joined or participated in the competition. When it ended, they'd gathered at the border to steal the fragment from Miles, resulting in bloodshed and carnage. If the Tribulation sect expanded their territory to the northeastern border, who knew how many cities and civilians would turn to ashes? Increase the surveillance and stay vigilant. Leave the rest to the Leviathan unit. They'll take action when there's a chance. Yes, sir. The captain sent Stephen high-definition pictures of the battles to his phone after hanging up. There were familiar faces like the elders and the internal members of the ancient factions, Warhawk's mercenary group, and what remained of the Northern European and African teams. Stephen noticed something in the sky in the pictures. He enlarged the screen, and the cluster of black dots turned into vultures. They were likely affiliated with the orc who'd tried to steal the prize. Stephen went next door to consult Ash and Rhett. What do you think about the orcs and the ghost ship? They're connected somehow. In the past, our group attempted to steal the treasures of Phantasma Isle, Ash said. Unfortunately, we were caught and locked up. Orcs take a long time to progress in their cultivation. Maybe some of them are from the ancient era like us. Stephen had an idea. He asked Ash and Rhett if they could contact the orcs and spread rumors about the sacred manual. Once the conflict intensified, the orcs would no doubt launch a large-scale attack on the Tribulation sect to steal the fragment. Ash and Rhett agreed to take on the mission. Will it be difficult for you to cross the mountains and the ocean to reach the snowy plains? Stephen asked. It's nothing we can't handle, Ash replied confidently. The environment is now milder than our era. Besides, we don't necessarily have to fight to the death. Okay, stay safe. If things get too dangerous, leave immediately. The storm raged on for hours before letting up. Amanda led her fleet to an unnamed island close to the island where Silver Shield Corporation was conducting their research. They could replenish their supplies by robbing theirs. As Amanda and her team stepped off the ship, Herman's team descended from the sky. His disappointed expression spoke volumes of what had happened at the northeastern border. I wasn't expecting so many other factions to be there. I also didn't know the Tribulation sect was that powerful. Your life is more important, Amanda said. Let's take a break and come up with a new plan. Stephen's gems washed up on shore. They'd locked on to the orcs' exact location. Ash and Rhett set off for a coincidental encounter with the orcs. As the orcs prepared a bonfire and went hunting for food, Amanda brought Herman up to speed. I can't think of anyone who would attack us on the ocean. Could it be the Tribulation sect? I doubt it. They've been hiding in the snowy plains for a long time. They're not suited for battles at sea. It must be the U.S. Warhawk and Maplewood's fleet had suffered heavy losses after the sudden explosion. Their naval forces were limited, and they wouldn't start another conflict so soon. Cadis's influence was practically non-existent after they unofficially became a United States territory. Based on the situation of the neighboring countries, the island state and the U.S. were the only suspects. Herman's suspicion was a guess. There was a 50-50% chance he was right. The culprit could be either of those two countries. Amanda thought back to the incident at sea. I didn't see any ships from the U.S. near us. I think we were attacked by some large sea creature. It doesn't matter, Herman said. If the United States' military finds the island, we'll absorb their energy and make quick work of them. Orcs had a convenient way of increasing their strength. It was similar to how wild beasts hunted weaker animals as their prey. It wouldn't be long before the Tribulation sect returned to their territory in the snowy plains. It was too late for Amanda and Herman to attempt another ambush, so they switched gears to a more feasible goal. These ships floated to the surface after the explosion. Phantasma Isle will reappear soon. Amanda was skeptical. You think there's treasure on the island? It's just one of the many ruins of a battlefield left behind from an ancient war. We won't know until we explore. The forbidden areas of the faction that used to live on the island have to be somewhere. The defensive array lasted thousands of years. I'm positive the forbidden area was preserved. Amanda had nothing to do for the time being. Even though she was doubtful, she and Herman sailed to the area where the defensive array had triggered an explosion to look around. Neither of them knew how long it would take for Phantasma Isle to resurface. During this time, Stephen and Kim were involved in high-profile activities in Cadiz. They had to inspect the ongoing construction projects and prepare for interviews. In comparison, Warhawk's higher-up, Sawyer, and Maplewood's diplomat, Walter, were sitting on the sidelines. They met up at a presidential suite of a luxury hotel to complain about their lack of progress. They hadn't achieved any of their goals. Their superiors wouldn't be pleased when they returned to their respective countries. "Isn't it time for us to do something?" Sawyer urged. "The U.S. is profiting from their projects, and all we're doing is watching." Walter's eyes narrowed suspiciously. "Did Warhawk give you another mission?" "No, that's not it." During the past few days, Sawyer had been browsing the internet to relieve his boredom. He came across bounties for the Tribulation Sect and the Sacred Manual fragment. The reward was on the rise. It had reached more than 9 digits. If he successfully stole the fragment and killed Miles, that reward would be his, and it would take some of the pressure off his shoulders. Walter prodded his food with his fork, clearly uninterested. "You watch the competition, so you should know exactly how powerful the Tribulation Sect is. Who cares if they're offering a high reward? It's not worth the risk." Sawyer held out his phone to show Walter the bounty's details. More than 1,000 people had accepted, and the number was still increasing. The Tribulation Sect has enemies from around the world. They can't defend the fragment forever. When they're hanging by a thread, that's when we'll make our move. Do you really want to stay here, wasting the days away? Walter was somewhat convinced. It took a few minutes of contemplation before he agreed. They rounded up their respective teams and headed for Cadis's port. The second prison breakout at the Seven Stars prison began with thunderous momentum, but it didn't take long for it to fizzle out into a scandal forgotten by the public. The fugitives were nowhere to be found. Ezra and his group had met up with the Oracle of the Tribulation Sect, Bastion, and established an alliance in a short amount of time. They sent the information they gathered to Stephen. The Tribulation Sect sent out their Oracle, and they were hiding in Annapolis without us knowing. Things could have gotten dangerous if we didn't find out. "There's a bounty for the Tribulation Sect circulating the internet," Kim said. "Maybe that'll get rid of them." Stephen didn't think assassins could match up to the ancient martial arts faction. He believed that the key to resolving this issue was Ezra and the undercover prisoners. "Bastion's team is hiding in the mountain range near the Seven Stars prison, probably because they think the safest place to be is the most dangerous one." Stephen agreed with her. "Miles has the Sacred Manual fragment. There's no reason for Bastion's team to rush back to their territory. They must be staying because they're scheming to ruin the country." They guessed correctly, because the second wave of conflict was about to begin. Bastion didn't know how much damage Ezra and his group had caused to break out of prison. He wanted to use this as an opportunity to rescue more of the prisoners and rope them in. At this time, Bastion and Ezra were camping out in the mountains while their teams were out hunting for food. Bastion observed Ezra's youthful appearance. "Aren't you a bit young to have been thrown into the Seven Stars prison? What heinous crime did you commit?" Ezra flashed a mysterious smile. "Don't mind the details. My identity isn't important. Our priority is to work together to achieve our goals." Bastion's mission from Augustus was to break out the prisoners and instigate a wave of turmoil in the U.S. It had been a while since his metallic beetle sneaked into the depths of the prison. He had a general understanding of the layout and distribution of personnel. "You're right, Ezra. Are you interested in following me back to the prison and wreaking havoc?" "Fighting and killing are my specialties, but what can you give me in return?" As an ancient martial arts faction, the Tribulation Sect had accumulated a vast reserve of wealth. Any amount Ezra chose would be a drop in the ocean. "We've newly acquainted, so our friendship isn't very deep, but I guarantee that anything materialistic is within our capabilities. If there's something you want, just say it. Our faction needs strong allies like you." Ezra pretended to think about his answer. "I heard Cardinal Miles won the most recent martial arts competition. My companions and I are interested in the prize. One glimpse is all we want." "That's easy. After we destroy the prison, I'll take you with me to Scotty. You'll be an honored guest of the Tribulation sect. Bastion wasn't worried about Ezra pulling tricks in their own territory. Letting him and his group take a look at the sacred manual wouldn't be a problem. Later that night, Ezra sent Stephen the details about their discussion. Bastion's plan was set for midnight tomorrow. The incoming battle would be fierce. Stephen asked Noor, Wes, and Aston to stay by Kim's side and protect her. They would personally experience just what kind of person the Oracle was tonight. Construction workers were working in the mountain forest outside the prison's tunnel. Stephen and Jace had put the workers' uniforms on and disguised themselves as part of the group. They returned to Annapolis in secret, so no one knew they were here. Everyone thought they were still in Cadis. Jace noticed Stephen glancing in the direction of the bustling research institute. Dr. Dalton and his team had likely made some new discoveries. There are a few hours left before midnight. I'll stay outside and keep watch. Why don't you head inside for now? Your spy will let us know when Bastion's team is coming. Stephen estimated that Bastion was at the later stages of the Immortal Realm. He wouldn't be able to break through to the Red Dust Immortal Realm in such a short amount of time. Stephen decided to take Jace up on his offer and went to the lab. Warhawk has sent a team of genetically modified martial artists to Cadis, Dr. Dalton reported. They'll be heading north to steal the secret manual fragment from the Tribulation sect. The smart chips inside Amber and Mitty made them elite undercover spies without their knowledge, but the Tribulation sect wasn't a typical ancient faction. They had talismans as their weapons. There was a limit to the regeneration of Warhawk's team. Even if they managed to survive one explosion, it was highly unlikely that they would live through another. Did Warhawk make another breakthrough with their biochemical technology? Stephen asked. Their technology is the same, but they've made major adjustments to the body. Their bones are as strong as metal. It's sturdier than a tank or the hull of a warship. What would happen if they were caught up in an explosion? Wouldn't the high temperature and impact destroy every cell in their body? Dr. Dalton turned his laptop around to show Stephen the blueprint of the metallic bones. There's another layer underneath the metal. It contains the original cells. If the metallic layer on the surface is destroyed, the cells beneath can facilitate their regeneration. As for the precise metrics of how the metallic bones could handle, Dr. Dalton didn't have an answer. Amber and Mitty were only responsible for researching genes and improving genetic modification. The materials were provided by another team, and this information hadn't been transmitted through the chips. Sounds like an interesting battle is about to break out at Scatty's snowy plains, Stephen said. We should also prepare for our own battle. As the sky darkened and the night fell, the construction workers called it a day and went home, leaving Jace and Stephen to wait for Bastion's team alone. In the darkness of the night, Stephen found himself missing Tristan and Zane. They were a handful, but there was never a boring moment when they were around. He also didn't have to worry about any outcome of the battle with them by his side. Tristan and Zane's martial arts were far more superior to most of their enemies. There were a lot of things he didn't need to personally handle with them taking charge. It had been a while since they'd started investigating the real identities of the Northern European and African teams. There were still no leads. Several hours later, the faint howls of beasts sounded from the depths of the mountain. They hunted in the dead of night. Bastion and Ezra led their teams through the forest. The tunnel below was brightly lit. Bastion pointed to the guards. Deal with them first. Then we'll activate the metal gate. It's not far from the entrance of the tunnel. The guards inside aren't that strong. I'll destroy the cells to let the prisoners out. Ezra had an uneasy feeling. How did Bastion know that? Had he infiltrated the prison before? Leave the guards to me. Sure, show me your true strength. Gray clouds blocked the moon in the sky, and the dim forest darkened. Ezra slowly descended the mountain with his group. They slowed their breathing and concentrated, doing their best to suppress the fluctuations in their auras to blend into the environment. Lure the guards to me. I'll take care of them. Isn't that a bit risky? There's more than a dozen of them. The alarm will sound as soon as the fight starts. I can handle it. Ezra's body was produced using an advanced biochemical technology. His skill set consisted of different attributes, and they were handy in all kinds of environments. Guards appeared in their path when they reached the edge of the forest. Ezra concentrated his inner energy at his fingertips and tapped each of their chests in quick succession. Their bodies went limp and they collapsed. Stephen and Jace were watching from a distance. "He's skilled," Jace said, impressed. "He targeted their acupuncture points to make them lose strength in their muscles. It's a non-fatal method to immobilize them." "Dr. Dalton said he transmitted all of the information from the martial arts database into Ezra's body," Stephen explained. "He's an all-arounder in combat." Jace looked past Ezra and his group and saw Bastion's team hiding in the vicinity. "Should we confront them now or let them enter the prison?" Fighting to the death with the Tribulation sect was too much of a sacrifice. Stephen didn't want to lose any of his people. "The interior is a sealed space. Once they venture inside, we blow up the entrance of the tunnel. None of them will come out alive." The patrolling guards were quickly taken care of. Ezra moved their unconscious bodies to the grass out of sight. No one would be able to tell if they were alive or dead. He had just finished cleaning up the scene when Bastion came over with his team. "Your methods were simple but effective. Good work. I've shown you what I'm capable of. Now it's your turn. Make this interesting for me," Bastion grinned. "Just wait, you won't be disappointed." He controlled the metallic beetle inside the prison. It scuttled to the cells and gnawed on the steel bars. The prisoners noticed the strange sight, but none of them made a sound. They waited to see how the situation would develop. Bastion's team entered the tunnel. A console was embedded in the wall. He pressed the button and the gears started turning. The guards on the other side were startled. They hadn't received prior notice of the gates needing to be opened tonight. The gate weighed dozens of tons. It rose slowly. Stephen and Jace rushed to the tunnel and launched an attack. Waves of inner energy covered the entrance. Jace intentionally left an opening for Ezra's group to slip away. Bastion whirled around in alarm. He was so close to succeeding. Where did these people come from? Stephen crossed the tunnel and pressed the button, halting the gate 3 feet above the ground. "Mr. Sovereign, why are you here in the middle of the night? Don't you have more important things to do?" Bastion said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Stephen glanced at his team. "The real question is, do you need this many people to deal with a nobody like me?" Bastion's first thought was to kill Stephen and Jace instantly, but then he realized it would be a great contribution if he caught the Sovereign alive. He could use him to threaten the country. The interior of the tunnel was narrow. The captain of the patrol team was waiting on the other side of the gate. He believed in Stephen and Jace's capabilities, and he was also confident that the Tribulation sect wouldn't try to detonate the tunnel, because that would be mutual destruction for both parties. Sounds of an intense battle drifted into the cave. It was the Leviathan unit and Ezra putting on an act. "There's nowhere to run," Stephen said. "Surrender now." "Why should I? Everything will be resolved once I capture you." Bastion's figure blurred. He closed the distance between them in a split second. Their swords clashed, sending waves of energy crashing into the building. The tunnel had been fortified with special material, making it sturdy and immune to most damage. Jace and Bastion's team started a battle of their own to the side. The Leviathan unit's mechanical team transported machine guns, cannons, and other firearms to the entrance of the tunnel. Their voices sounded in Stephen's earpiece. "The preparations are ready. Once you and Jace leave the tunnel, we'll take care of the rest." "Okay, give me a minute. I don't think he came here without a plan." Stephen condensed the aura of his sword into a cascade of light. Bastion used his talisman as a shield to block the attack and at the same time remotely controlled the metallic beetle. The destructive potential of the tiny critter was beyond imagination. Its sharp teeth gnawed through the bars of the cells one after another. The prisoners heard sounds of fighting coming from the tunnel. No one said a word when they saw the strange beetle making quick work of the cells, but there was a mutual understanding that this was their chance to escape. Sensing that it was about time, the prisoners who'd had most of the steel bars and restraints destroyed exerted their strength and broke out of their cells. 30 prisoners ran wildly towards the elevator. The captain was astonished when he saw the familiar scene unfold before him. This was the second time convicts had broken out right under his nose. He signaled for his team to follow him to the cells. If he didn't handle this properly, the responsibility would fall on his shoulders. Maybe he would be executed to make up for the consequences. On his way there, the captain informed Stephen of what had happened. The prisoners have broken out of their cells. They're running towards the exit. Stephen knew right away that this was Bastian's real plan. Don't chase them. Check the remaining cells to make sure the rest of the prisoners are secured. What should we do about the prisoners who escaped? Heavy artillery is deployed outside the tunnel. There's no future for them. The captain was anxious, but he trusted Stephen's judgment. The 3-foot gap below the metal gate became the prisoners' only exit. A stream of convicts crawled out of the gate and crowded into the tunnel. Bastian was beginning to feel more confident with the appearance of his new allies. He gestured to Stephen. Remember him? That's the Sovereign. Capture him and the U.S. will be thrown into chaos. That's the only way for you to leave this country. Under the dim lighting, the prisoners made out Stephen's familiar face. They charged at him like mad bulls. In terms of momentum, they had the advantage. Stephen unleashed a torrent of flames that swept through the tunnel. Bastian's team used their talismans to form a barrier of ice to ward off the fire. Stephen turned around and rushed out of the tunnel. Before he left, he didn't forget to press the button to close the gate and seal off the tunnel from the prison. Ezra and his group were hiding in the bushes nearby. The battle was escalating, and they'd fulfilled their role. They didn't need to show themselves again. As for Jace, he'd left the tunnel and was in the artillery camp. Large-caliber firearms were deadly, even for martial artists with high cultivation. How's the situation inside? Jace asked when he saw Stephen leaving the tunnel. It's not too bad, but there's around 30 prisoners who've escaped. What? Did the Oracle breach the prison's defenses? This is unbelievable. How did he manage that? Stephen didn't have an answer, but that wasn't important. The only way out was through the tunnel. No one would be escaping tonight. The trigger was pulled, and the large-caliber cannons fired endlessly. The explosive projectiles ricocheted off the walls in the narrow space, increasing its damage by several times. The entire tunnel was turned into a sea of fire within seconds. Some were immobilized by the deafening sound waves, others were blown to pieces, and the rest were burnt to death. The flames quickly reduced the amount of oxygen in the tunnel, and soon a vacuum was formed. It didn't matter how high a martial artist's cultivation was. They were human, and if they couldn't breathe, that was the end of them. Stephen stared at the tunnel's entrance. Not a single person made it past the flames. The metal gate was the main reason for their success. It isolated the tunnel from the prison and contained the explosion. 200 artillery shells were fired before Stephen instructed them to stop. He told Jace to find the Oracle's body and take his talismans. While everyone was busy, Ezra led his team back to the clearing. The only person he took orders from was Stephen. He ignored the Leviathan unit members as he walked up to him. Mr. Adams, is there anything else you'd like me to do? Do you have a deep understanding of the Tribulation sect? Playing the role of antagonist. Take the Oracle's talismans and make a trip to Scotty. Once they're riled up, they'll take action as a group. That'll be our opportunity to get rid of them. As an artificial human, unless Ezra was killed, every mission was predicted to have a 100% success rate. And due to the special composition of his body, he was capable of surviving in extreme environments, even the barren, snowy plains of Scotty. Jace led the Leviathan unit members into the tunnel to search the bodies. The remains were charred beyond recognition. It was impossible to identify the Oracle. Jace picked up a few relatively well-preserved talismans and handed them to Stephen. This is all we could find. Stephen nodded and gave the talismans to Ezra. He pocketed them and set off for his new mission. When the tunnel was cleaned, the metal gate rose once again. The captain of the patrol team was waiting on the other side with a guilty look on his face. He was ready to apologize for his oversight. The enemy destroyed the steel bars of the cells. That's how the prisoners escaped. I don't know how he did it. The metallic beetle was lying dormant in a corner after Bastian's death. The prison was dim, and it was difficult to find a small critter camouflaged in the darkness. Stephen had already come to terms that the Tribulation sect had broken into a prison the second time. It's not unusual for our enemies to target the Seven Stars prison. The security is tight, and the defenses are high, but that won't stop them from trying. He didn't have the slightest intention of reprimanding the captain or shifting the blame to him. The captain was so grateful that he almost shed tears. Stephen went back to Annapolis in the morning. His first stop was the Military Administration Department. He called the person in charge of the military bases and relevant personnel into the conference room. "The Tribulation sect will be taking action soon. To prepare, send a team of 100,000 troops to the fortress at the northeastern border. Include medical supplies and firearms." The person overseeing the military bases nodded in agreement. The commander of the military base in the northeast expressed his confusion. "We'll make sure the border's defenses are watertight, but based on our strength comparison analysis, the Tribulation sect is inferior to the multi-country allied army that was previously stationed near the border. This setup seems overly cautious." Stephen had his reasons. He drew a straight line on the map, connecting the northeastern border with Cadiz. "We're not sending them over just to prepare for the Tribulation sect. The battle will give them combat experience, and if we win single-handedly, the voices of opposition in Cadiz will die down. We're collaborating on multiple projects. They basically become our ally, but their military improvements are non-existent. When the battle is over and the team's training is complete, we'll send them to Cadiz." The military big shots understood his goal and expressed their support. Stephen gave them the rundown of the Tribulation sect. The members clad in black robes had varying cultivations, ranging from the divine Grandmaster realm to the initial stages of the immortal realm. The cardinals were at the early to intermediate stages of the immortal realm, and the oracle he fought was at the later stages. As for the high and mighty Pope Augustus, he didn't have an accurate assessment. Stephen warned the commander to take note of their talismans. They were a simplified version of the sacred manual, and their damage potential was high. The convoy of fully equipped off-road vehicles made their way to the north. The large deployment attracted the attention of many hostile forces, including the Tribulation sect. At the Ice Castle, Miles was treated as a hero and revered by the entire faction. He placed the glass case containing the sacred manual fragment in front of Augustus. "Seeing the legend with my own eyes is much better than hearing about it. Miles, you've made a significant contribution to our holy mission. You'll receive a generous reward later." "Thank you," Miles said. "Everything I do is for the sake of our church." Augustus carefully opened the glass case and turned the fragment around. Everyone in the hall craned their necks to catch a glimpse. Augustus's mind went blank. Those who weren't strong enough bled from their 7 orifices. Pope Augustus was the most powerful member of the Church of Catastrophe. He sensed something amiss the moment he laid eyes on the sacred manual. While he was comprehending the fragment, it felt like he'd been walked into a dense fog. There was no sense of time or space, nor was it possible to distinguish directions. Augustus had broken through the red dust immortal realm, and he didn't experience the backlash of the mysterious spiritual force. He waved his hand and set up a translucent defensive array to shield the glass case. "My believers, if your cultivation base is insufficient, don't force yourselves to comprehend the sacred manual. We'll store the fragment and take it out again when the time is right." The good news of obtaining a fragment of the sacred manual was dampened when news of the oracle's death reached the castle. Bastion had been killed at the Seven Stars prison. The United States' media affiliated with the government had already made an announcement. After a moment of silence, Augustus spoke. "We've paid a terrible price to obtain this fragment. Several of our cardinals have met their end, and even an oracle has fallen." A serious atmosphere settled in the hall. The cardinals shared a look. They were thinking the same thing. If they were to carry out dangerous missions at this time, there was a high risk of them losing their lives. One cardinal stood up. "We've gotten our hands on the sacred manual fragment. We should lay low for a while. I suggest holding a trial and promoting our members to fill in the empty seats." His words caused a small commotion among the lower-ranked members donning black robes. The oracles and cardinals made up the upper management of the Church of Catastrophe. Everyone else were ordinary laborers. There was a big difference between their statuses. Augustus approved. This was a reliable method to restore the faction's glory. With the prospects of great rewards, there'd always be a brave man. It was important to bestow money, power, and status to the members to secure their loyalty and faith. "I'll prepare the training grounds. Those who are interested may head over and participate in the test when it's ready. Everyone who passes will be candidates for a cardinal position. At the end of the meeting, everyone dispersed to take advantage of the time they had left to cultivate and prepare for the trial. The cardinals and oracles had access to unique cultivation manuals and weapons. The treatment of members in black robes was much worse. The dirty, tiring, and dangerous tasks fell on them, and they were required to obey unconditionally. The lively city of Annapolis became somewhat desolate. The abundance of negative news had been aired on TV lately. Ordinary civilians and wealthy families alike were anxious. A radical faction had won the martial arts competition. A group of convicts had escaped from the Seven Stars prison. The eastern sea routes were blocked by Warhawk and Maplewood's fleet, and a large number of troops had been deployed in the north. Those alarming announcements were relayed one after another, and the public was concerned that the peace would soon disappear. Stephen was sitting in his office at the military administration building with nothing to do. There was no update from Ezra. Ash and Red had followed the illusory pearls to find the ghost ship, and there was no news from them either. Tristan and Zane were also off the radar. No one knew where they'd followed the Northern European and African teams to. Just as Stephen was about to head to Cadus to seek him, the administrative secretary entered his office. A strange phenomenon has occurred in Cadus's international waters. Is it similar to the previous explosion? No, there haven't been reports of ocean disasters, but we've spotted a whirlpool at sea. The secretary turned on the computer and connected it to a low-orbit reconnaissance satellite. The captured image was of high quality. A whirlpool spanning hundreds of feet in diameter had appeared in the middle of the ocean. Theoretically, an earthquake at the bottom of the sea could alter the structure of the Earth's crust and result in whirlpools, but the seismic waves didn't indicate any sign of an earthquake. Stephen recognized the longitude and latitude of the area where the whirlpool had appeared. It was directly above Phantasma Isle. Without the defensive array, the ghost ships had surfaced not too long ago. He speculated that the island was also floating to the surface. Stephen took a private jet to Cadus. Nothing much was going on, and the island hadn't made its appearance yet. This was his chance to accompany his other half. A luxurious convoy escorted Kim through the streets of Cadus as she inspected the businesses recently started by wealthy families from the U.S. The flow of foreign capital depended on their hard work. Stephen had left for Annapolis 2 days ago, and she was excited to see him return so soon. Kim gave him a report of what she'd discovered from her inspection. The number of businesses from the U.S. in Cadus had exceeded 200, and each of the profits are above 10 million. Their industries involve energy, ores, communications, maritime transportation, infrastructure, daily necessities, luxury goods, and so on. If the U.S. continues to expand at this rate, we'll be inseparable from Cadus within a few months. Skyreach Corporation hadn't been making any significant developments lately. They had to step back to let other businesses have a chance to develop. Looks like Cadus's royal family's been going along with it, Stephen said. They're not affected by Warhawk and Maplewood's proposals. I heard their delegations teams turn to their respective countries without accomplishing anything significant. They'll come back sooner or later. I wouldn't be surprised if they showed up in the U.S. to discuss a partnership next time. Stephen's phone buzzed. The Leviathan unit's intelligence team had sent him information on Cadus's military. Their strength was surprisingly low. Their numbers were small, and even their weapons and equipment were old models from a few years ago. They were sufficient for combat exercises, but not in a real battle. He decided to discuss improvements in Cadus's defense after the threat at the northeastern border was resolved. Kim took out a newly printed document from her purse and proudly held it up. Her photo was pasted on the front page along with the shiny golden words, Honorary Officer of the Business Administration. What do you think? Am I as powerful as you now? Stephen's eyes were glued to her beautiful picture and the golden lettering. He was awed by her accomplishment. What did you do to pressure the king? Javon really knows how to choose talented people. My hard work, of course. My projects have increased employment, raising the living standards of the people, and created profits for the government. Cadus's officials begged me to accept the position. The power of an honorary officer was small, but it held a symbolic meaning. Kim had won the hearts of the people, and taking on this position would change her image from here on out. At noon, they went to a seafood restaurant to have lunch and celebrate. In the middle of the meal, the surveillance satellite made a new discovery. A large, unfamiliar island had surfaced from the whirlpool. Traces of the ghost ships were caught in the image, which meant that Ash and Rhett's team were nearby. Stephen instructed the technical department to search for their signal at sea. He got in contact with Ash and Rhett 10 minutes later. They were on an old, rickety merchant ship searching for the ghost ships in the vast sea. It was a difficult task. Phantasma Isle is back on the surface, and the orcs are about to set foot on the island. How long will it take for you to catch up with them? Within 2 hours, Ash replied. This broken ship is giving me a headache. Thanks for your hard work. Ash and Rhett's group had been trapped on Phantasma Isle for thousands of years. The defensive array limited their range of activity to a fraction of the island. If there were mysterious areas hidden on the island, they wouldn't know about them. The ancient era was chaotic, and many martial artists perished in battle, Ash explained. Their remains, weapons, and cultivation manuals were treated as treasures. The martial arts factions that used to live on the island might have stored their treasures in a vault after collecting them, but we don't know where it's located. Gaining the orcs' trust is good enough, Stephen said. The treasures aren't important. Keep in contact at all times, and remember, if things get out of hand, leave right away. With his guidance, Ash and Rhett steered their broken ship in the other direction, heading for Phantasma Isle. Herman, Amanda, and their team of orcs were already there. Some of the houses were on the verge of collapse, while others were intact. They wouldn't have to worry about food, clothing, and accommodations. Their days of sailing aimlessly on the ocean had come to an end. They could use this place as their temporary base. Even without the protection of the defensive array, the rich spiritual energy of Phantasma Isle was sufficient to form a waterproof isolation layer around the island. That was what preserved the flowers, trees, and houses after the array was gone. Martial artists who cultivated the way of the orcs were regarded as monsters in the eyes of outsiders. They had to hide their identities when they were on land and avoid hunting. They were forced to take risks to develop and strengthen their forces. Phantasma Isle had surfaced at the perfect opportunity. The orcs started a campfire and cooked a delicious meal of seafood. Everyone dug in except Ermin. Amanda noticed that he was lost in thought. What are you thinking about? I failed to kill Miles, and I even lost a few members of my team. Orcs were few in number to begin with. Losing any of their companions was detrimental to their overall strength. The path of cultivation and martial arts has always been a difficult one, Amanda said. Death is all around us. Experiencing and overcoming hardships is the key to progressing. If we get the treasures on the island, we'll be much stronger than before. Herman had used Azora to sweep the island when they landed. He didn't sense the life force of the wild beasts in the forest. After this long, I don't know how much is left on the original island. We cultivate by absorbing the energy of beasts. The island's been underwater for a long time. How could any of them have survived thousands of years? Amanda reached for a skewer and nibbled on the fish. The ancient martial arts factions who used to live on the island had divine beasts as their guardians. They can be summoned through a ceremony. That's what we need to improve our cultivation. Stephen returned to the hotel with Kim and mobilized the reconnaissance satellites. The vegetation was dense on Phantasma Isle, and the aerial map couldn't display the entirety of the island. He was scrutinizing the footage when an explosion erupted from the crater, spewing smoke and lava. Ash and Red had told Stephen that during the ancient era, enemies of the resident ancient faction had destroyed the island's foundation and severed its connection with the earth. Where was this lava coming from? Stephen switched the interface, but he didn't find any signs of a geological disaster. Maybe the orcs had triggered a hidden mechanism on the island. Are you going to send out the warships to occupy the island? Kim asked. I'm going to wait for Ash and Rhett to contact the orcs first. We don't know what our enemies are up to. Stephen patiently continued to monitor the satellites. Ash and Rhett's broken merchant ship had finally reached Phantasma Isle. They couldn't wait to get off. After a scrumptious meal, Amanda and the orcs had left to investigate the island, leaving Herman to wait by the campfire alone. He was startled to see 2 young men walk up to him. He cautiously drew his weapon and stood up. Who are you 2? Where did you come from? Ash and Rhett squeezed out friendly smiles. Our ship malfunctioned. We were drifting at sea for several days before coming across the island. We'd be very grateful if you could lend us your assistance. Herman sized them up. He sensed the aura of a martial artist coming from them, but it wasn't that strong. He kept his guard up just in case. This island is uninhabited. I don't have tools or equipment to repair your ship. Ash and Rhett sighed dramatically. Oh well. They invited themselves over to the campfire and sat down. They took out a pile of canned food and packaged, unprocessed meat from their bags. Before they went out to sea, Stephen had prepared a vast assortment of food and beverages for them. It was impossible for them to starve under any circumstances. Ash and Rhett used the campfire as a convenient hot pot to cook their food. The meat and vegetables gave off a delicious aroma that made Herman's mouth water. His eyes widened when they pried open a bottle of wine and poured it into the container to cook with the rest of the food. Rhett waved Herman over and offered generously. Sit down and eat with us. We three are wanderers at sea. No need to be so restrained. Herman didn't hesitate. He sheathed his weapon and sat next to them to taste the delicacies. After Herman was roped in, Amanda and the Yorks came back. A brief introduction later, everyone sat around the fire for a delicious meal. You two are a blessing, Herman praised. We've been eating fish for every meal. We're getting tired of it. Rhett laughed heartily. We still have a lot of food on the ship. We don't mind sharing. What are your plans for the future? Amanda asked. Will you be staying on this island for the rest of your life? Ash knew she was fishing for information. He answered without batting an eye. We're planning to search for materials to repair our ship and open the solar panel to collect electricity. Hopefully the communication system still works and our people will come back to pick us up. Herman and Amanda didn't suspect anything. They nodded and went back to eating. Stephen was thousands of miles away. He heard every word of their conversation through their earpieces. He gave Ash and Rhett a few days to get closer to the Yorks and wander the island. During this time, he oversaw the development of businesses in Cadiz. Without pressure from Warhawk and Maplewood, the economy was back on track. With everything settled, Stephen went back to Annapolis with Kim. Meanwhile, Ezra and his group had finally entered the ice castle in Scotty's snowy plains. They pretended to be convicts who'd escaped from the Seven Stars prison. Their fake identities made it easy for them to gain the trust of the Tribulation sect. To expand and develop the faction outside of Scotty's territory, they needed extra help. Augustus instructed his people to prepare a feast of delicacies to welcome Ezra and his group. The taste was exquisite. Ezra stuffed slices of meat into his mouth and downed a glass of wine in one breath. His lack of table manners made Augustus laugh. You're quite an interesting person. Bringing these talismans back is a great help to our faction. What are your plans after this? Ezra wiped his mouth with a napkin. We're fugitives, and our names are on the United States' hit list. We're destined to live a life in hiding. Now that we've regained our freedom, we're planning to take it easy. We don't have a specific destination in mind. Since you're not in a hurry, why don't you stay here for now? Augustus offered. Our Church of Catastrophe is about to hold a trial to select a cardinal. It'll be an entertaining event for outsiders. Thank you for the invitation. We'll take you up on your offer. Augustus ordered his subordinates to arrange clothing and accommodations for Ezra's group. When Ezra was brought to his room, he searched every nook and cranny, both inside and outside. After confirming he wasn't being monitored, he sent his whereabouts to Stephen. He was deep in the tiger's den. If he wasn't careful, he could be killed at a moment's notice. Stephen was interested in the Tribulation sect's headquarters. The environment was harsh and dangerous. It wouldn't be that simple to sneak in, but they could deal a serious blow to the faction if they succeeded. He went to discuss this with the Leviathan unit's leader. In the meeting room, Stephen pulled up a map of Scotty's snowy plains. It was located to the west of the Verglas Strait. The Tribulation sect is about to hold a big event. The members in black robes will be tested and promoted to cardinals. The positions are limited, so the trial has to be dangerous to weed out those who aren't qualified. The Leviathan unit's leader understood what Stephen was planning, but the snowy plains was Scotty's territory, not theirs. It would be dangerous for him to venture into enemy territory. Mr. Adams, Ezra and his team have just made it to the castle. The climate makes it difficult for the recon satellites to depict a clear nautical chart. You'll be rushing in blind. Stephen may have taken down an oracle and some of the cardinals, but most of the tribulation sect members were still around, including the Pope. If we don't attack them now, they'll eventually come after us, because they're targeting the northeastern border. The war can't be avoided, and it would be better to fight away from our country. The further we are, the better. As a precaution, we'll move the naval forces to Verglas Strait. The ice castle is within range of the missiles. Stephen had thought it through. The Leviathan unit's leader could only agree, but he had one condition. He'd be tagging along to ensure Stephen's safety. The two of them allocated their responsibilities to the other staff before boarding a private jet to the fortress at the northeastern border. The higher the latitude, the colder the climate. Layers of frost formed on the plane's windows. The northeastern border had two major characteristics. One was the sea of trees, and the other was the snowy plains. The commander of the military base was waiting at the fortress with his subordinates to welcome Stephen and the Leviathan unit's leader. "Welcome to the northeastern military base, Mr. Adams. We've completed preparations as per your instructions." "Are there any issues with the reinforcements and supplies?" "No, we've completed the inspection. Everything is ready." The commander of the military base led Stephen and the Leviathan unit's leader to the command center. Stephen inspected the general situation of the camp along the way. He was satisfied with the soldiers' weapons and equipment. At the command center, Stephen set his steaming cup of coffee aside and focused on the map. Scotty's territory was beyond the northeastern border. Most of their population was concentrated in the east, where the climate was warmer. The snowy plains to the west were mostly abandoned. The layer of frozen earth thawed for around 3 to 4 months every year, but the shift in environment made it difficult to carry out large-scale projects. Roads and railways were also difficult to build because of the soft soil. Even if Scotty didn't send out their combat forces to defend the western region of their territory, no one would be interested in invading. The harsh climate was a natural barrier. "Can the long-range artillery reach the ice castle?" Stephen asked. The commander was careful with his words. He couldn't figure out what was the most powerful man in the U.S. thinking. "Yes, but Scotty will notice. It's not worth the risk of starting a war." The Leviathan unit's leader drew an arc on the map. This was the path Ezra's group had taken to enter the castle. Aside from environmental factors, there weren't any other risks. The commander volunteered to lead a team to protect Stephen. "We've been training in the region for a long time. We're familiar with the environment." "That's not necessary," Stephen said. "Your job is to defend the border. I brought a tour guide with me. We'll be leaving soon." The tour guide was the deceased Cardinal Sermeil's white and gray striped saber-toothed tiger. An AI chip had been implanted, and it was now under Stephen's command. The tribulation sect had been lively ever since Augustus announced the trial. Preparations were underway, and everyone was eager to give it a try. If they were promoted to a cardinal position, they'd have access to an endless supply of money, power, and rare martial arts training. Potential to break through to the red dust immortal realm. That was where most of the appeal came from. To the north of the ice castle was a deep crater formed by meteorites. There were rumors that when the meteorites crashed, it had released a special metallic powder from space that kept the environment inside the crater at a temperature of around -300 degrees Fahrenheit all year round. No matter how powerful a martial artist was, they would be frozen to death if they stayed in the crater longer than what their body could handle. Augustus made the long trek to the edge of the crater with one of the oracles by his side. Bastion wasn't the only oracle of the tribulation sect, but he was the strongest. He used to be Augustus's bodyguard. After his death, another oracle took his place. Currents of air flowed upwards from the bottom of the pit, preventing the snow from piling inside. Augustus tentatively waved the scepter in his hand. A golden shockwave crashed towards the center of the crater. The air currents tore it apart before it could unleash its destructive power. The oracle was concerned. "The members who've decided to take the trial won't be able to handle the air currents. There's going to be a lot of casualties." "A cardinal must have the ability to overcome obstacles," Augustus reasoned. "If a little bit of danger is enough to stop them, they're not worthy of the position." Making an accurate assessment of the battlefield was the basics of becoming a martial artist. If one believed that their cultivation was insufficient, then the trial would be over before it even started. Augustus mumbled an incantation. His scepter floated in the air and released a brilliant light. It was a weapon passed down from the previous popes. A minute later, a dragon of ice descended from the sky and landed in front of Augustus and the oracle. The ice dragon had been the guardian of the tribulation sect for countless years. Its eyes gleamed dangerously as it stared at two puny humans. "Why did you summon me? Disturbing my rest is a sin punishable by death." The dragon had greeted dozens of popes in its long life. It didn't care about Augustus. "We want to test our members and select a group of outstanding talents to promote," Augustus explained. "We were hoping you could transform this area into a training ground." "It's been a long time since we last saw each other. Since when are your black-robed members qualified to come to this place? What are you planning?" Augustus hurriedly gave the dragon a more detailed explanation without hiding anything. He would be torn to pieces if he made it angry. As the guardian of the tribulation sect, the dragon had to agree since he had a good reason. It took a deep breath and absorbed the spiritual energy in the region. When it breathed out, it released the energy into the crater. A violent explosion shook the pit. Sharp icicles flew in every direction. The oracle condensed a shield to protect himself and Augustus. Most of the icicles shot toward the depths of the crater, leaving marks on the smooth stone walls. The marks fused into a painting of the ice dragon. It radiated a rainbow of colors. "This is my totem. You may use your scepter to control its power and transform the interior of the crater." The oracle and Augustus thanked the dragon respectfully, but it flew away while their heads were bowed. The training grounds were ready, and the trial was about to begin. Ezra passed the information to Stephen. That night, Stephen and the Leviathan unit's leader rode the saber-toothed tiger and departed for Scotty's territory. The tiger had undergone special training. It was fast and agile, worthy of being called a battle mount. The chilly wind was like a blade cutting into the flesh as it swept past. To hide their presence, they couldn't use their inner energy to form a protective layer on their skin. "Mr. Adams, the trial will be going on for a few days. We don't need to arrive this early." Stephen observed the surrounding environment. There was nowhere to stop and take shelter. "It's too late to turn back now. The caves aren't any better. At least the tiger produces body heat." The Leviathan unit's leader conceded with a sigh. "That's true." Following the route Ezra provided, the tiger ran for more than 5 hours before they arrived at the outskirts of the snowy plains. The snow stretched for miles on end. The brightly lit castle of ice stood out in the desolate and empty environment. "The tribulation sect is up ahead," Stephen pointed out. "If we go any further, they'll see us and sense us. No matter how high their cultivation is, their talismans make them hard to deal with. Let's find somewhere to hide and assess their security." Without the cover of dense green foliage, Stephen and the Leviathan unit's leader stood out like a sore thumb. They were forced to crouch and hide in the cold snow. On the other hand, the tiger's fur blended in with the environment. It was less restrained, and it could survey the surroundings without being spotted. The guards patrolling the outer perimeter of the castle consisted of members in black robes. It was more like taking a stroll than keeping their eyes peeled for intruders. No one had ever gotten close to their territory before. Ezra had a talent for bragging and flattery, so Augustus treated him like a distinguished guest. He introduced himself as the leader of the fugitives and claimed he had many companions left in the U.S., leading Augustus to believe that if they worked together, they could smoothly occupy the northeastern border and use it as a safe haven for both parties. The next morning, Augustus led a crowd of members in black robes out of the castle and set off in a grandiose manner towards the crater. Of course, this included Ezra. "If you're interested, you can come with us and watch," Augustus offered. "You'll be safe if you stay on the surface. The crater is a region bestowed by the heavens. If it weren't for the meteorites, it wouldn't have existed at all." Ezra's glib tongue went into action without missing a beat. Attempting a trial in an extreme environment like the crater already proves the strength of the tribulation sect. You could take over the ancient martial arts factions if you wanted to. Augustus laughed. "I don't want to waste my time on trash. I watched their performance at the competition from the broadcast. It was disappointing. I'll eradicate them myself when there's a chance." Augustus didn't care about the Hidden Cloud Temple, Spectre Cemetery, Bloodfiend Valley, or the Peach Blossom Moor. Whether they were alone or joined forces, they wouldn't pose a threat to the Tribulation sect. Seeing that everyone was present, the Oracle introduced the trial's rules to the crowd. The totem of the ice dragon on the walls had formed puppets at the bottom of the crater. They attacked all living things. When the black-robed members entered, they would have to resist the freezing cold and defeat the puppets. The Cardinal had stored tokens at the center of the crater. Those who brought a token back to the surface would pass the trial. Augustus added to the rules. Conflict wasn't allowed between believers, especially killing or assassinations. Whispers broke out in the crowd. "It's freezing cold in there. To survive, we need protective gear. Ordinary members like us don't have anything like that. Just walk around and gain experience. This is an opportunity the Pope and the Oracle prepared us for. They're the lucky ones chosen by the heavens." Those with ambition weren't convinced by this side conversation. As the saying goes, the master leads the way, but the cultivation depends on the individual. After so many years of painstaking cultivation, it was time for them to be promoted. "You're missing the point," one ambitious member said. "The crater is a complicated environment. Even our talismans might not be able to do anything against the puppets. Luck will be a big factor." Another member chimed in. "Sounds like you're confident." "Of course I am. Why else would I have come here? I don't have that much time to spare." Ezra listened in on their conversations. He had a rough understanding of the trial and the members who'd be taking part. Augustus had asked him to accompany him and observe the trial. He wouldn't be able to help Stephen infiltrate the Tribulation sect. The black-robed members slid down the edge of the crater. There were several hundred of them. The rest of the Tribulation sect gathered on the surface to watch. Stephen and the Leviathan unit's leader cautiously approached on the back of a tiger. The opening of the crater spanned 20 miles. If they went around, the Tribulation sect wouldn't notice them. Half an hour later, they arrived at the edge of the crater. The air currents were concentrated at the center, blocking the view from the other side and making the outer ring safe to jump down. They sensed fluctuations in energy down below that didn't belong to martial artists. The glowing totem on the wall must be behind it. The ice dragon was vivid and lifelike. Its eyes were particularly hypnotic. Stephen looked into its gleaming eyes for 1 second and felt like he was in a trance. "The Pope must have set up a strange array." "Would you like me to take care of it?" the Leviathan unit's leader volunteered. After going through all sorts of hurdles and dangers to reach this place, Stephen couldn't turn back now. He peered over the edge to observe. When the time was right, he signaled for the Leviathan unit's leader to follow him, and they both slid down the wall. Within minutes, the freezing temperature seeped into their internal organs. Stephen felt like his inner energy and blood were seconds away from being frozen. He looked at the Tribulation sect members in black robes. Their movements didn't seem to be affected. They were moving quickly towards the center. Since their territory was located in the snowy plains, he guessed that they had practiced a certain type of martial arts that gave them a higher resistance to cold. An explosion erupted from the bottom of the crater, and the trial officially commenced. Dragons of ice emerged from within and spewed chilly waves of energy at the black-robed members. Stephen and the Leviathan unit's leader dug into the cracks of the wall to gain a foothold and stop halfway in their descent. The leader pulled out a few daggers strapped to his waist. He laced them with his inner energy and threw them into the crater. The black-robed members weren't prepared for an attack from above. Many of them were hit by the daggers, but it didn't cause too much damage. The daggers grazed their skin, and because of the cold, their blood clotted quickly. Treatment wasn't necessary. "Are you trying to test the reactions?" Stephen asked, confused. "My dagger's blades are soaked in anesthetic venom," the leader explained. "A small amount dissolved in the blood causes paralysis. If they can't move, the cold temperature will kill them." "You're well prepared." Minutes later, the black-robed members began to fall one after another. They struggled to crawl along the ground, hoping to ask their companions for help. But the trial was full of dangers, and no one had the time to bother with them. The leader maneuvered his daggers using his inner energy and killed over 20 members effortlessly. As the daggers were soaked in more blood, the concentration of venom decreased. Stephen directed his inner energy at the gravel at the bottom of the crater. When the dragon puppets targeted the black-robed members, the gravel wrapped around their ankles, halting their movements and catching them off guard. The puppets' attacks hit them at full force. Their bones shattered, and the cold air invaded their bodies, freezing them to death. The scarlet tokens at the center radiated an unusual energy. They caught Stephen and the leader's attention. At first glance, they couldn't tell what the tokens were. Maybe they were more useful than talismans, but they couldn't confirm their speculations. The Tribulation sect was observing the trial from the surface. They would be noticed if they snatched the tokens without a plan. The Leviathan unit's leader sprinkled venom powder on another dagger and resumed his earlier tactics. The speed at which he dealt with the black-robed members was neither fast nor slow. It was just right to avoid attracting attention. There were many black-robed members in the crater, and Augustus didn't care what happened to them. The strong were his main concern. The weak should be eliminated, and the only way to weed out. At some point during the trial, the sky darkened. The totem emitted a faint blue glow, lighting up the dim crater. Stephen and the Leviathan unit's leader had been clinging to the wall for a while now. Some of their energy had been used to resist the cold, and they were reaching their limits. They decided to head back to the surface to take a break. There'd be another chance when night fell. It was easy to slide down the crater, but going back up was much more difficult. They dug into the walls with their fingers and slowly climbed up the wall. It took a long time before they returned to the edge of the crater. There was nowhere to take shelter in Scotty's snowy plains. Stephen and the Leviathan unit's leader hid in the snow and suppressed their auras as much as they could. They'd prepared medicinal pills to restore their energy, and it was enough to last them a few days in the snow. Stephen recalled the glowing ice dragon on the wall. He'd assessed the totem with his inner energy and sensed an unusual energy coming from it. The totem was controlling the dragon puppets. It was the referee of the trial, while Augustus and the rest of the Tribulation sect were spectators. If he could control the totem, he might be able to find a way to deal with the black-robed members faster. The Leviathan unit's leader was skeptical. The totem is nothing more than a painting on the wall. The only way to invade the space it contains is to reach inside with your mental energy. It's too risky. If something happens, your mind and spiritual energy will be damaged. Compared to physical injuries, it's much more difficult to heal. Stephen understood the risks, but it was either now or never. This was their best opportunity to get rid of the black-robed members at the same time. If they waited, the next opportunity could be at the northeastern border. He traveled thousands of miles to reach the snowy plains of Scotty. He wasn't about to let this chance go. Judging from the sounds of battle coming from the crater, the trial was intensifying by the minute. Stephen and the Leviathan unit's leader recovered their condition as fast as they could. They slid down the wall to a shallow ravine. Stephen carefully extracted his spiritual energy into a swirl of light in his palm. This was the purest form of mental energy. It was crystal clear and carried its own consciousness. He gently released his spiritual energy towards the totem. The leader was worried. Without your spiritual energy, your body is defenseless. We should be safe here. No one's paying attention to us. They're focused on the trial. If they do find us, it won't be too late to retreat. Stephen patted the saber-toothed tiger's head, running his fingers through its soft fur. It was white with gray stripes, ideal for camouflaging in the snow. Its perception was keener than most martial artists. He could leave the safety in the tiger's hands. When Stephen's spiritual energy touched the ice dragon's eye on the wall, it was absorbed instantly, and his consciousness was pulled into an unfamiliar space. He opened his eyes and found himself standing on the back of a dragon. It was so large that only its head was visible. The rest of its body was shrouded by clouds. The ice dragon turned its head. Its gleaming eyes stared at him like he was an insignificant speck of dust. "You're brave for a human. How dare you barge into my holy land? Even the Tribulation sect wouldn't dare to enter without permission." Stephen looked down and saw nothing but clouds. He couldn't determine how high they were or where they were. The sheer size of the ice dragon was unnerving, but he didn't give in. This body was condensed from spiritual energy. Even if it's destroyed, my true body won't be harmed. You're smart, but that won't save you. The dragon opened its mouth, and a burst of energy filled Stephen's vision. It covered a wide range, and there was nowhere to run. He circulated his inner energy and ran along the length of the dragon. It was like a bridge with no end. He ran down the middle, careful not to slip too far left or right. There was no telling what would happen if he fell. It was either the ground or the bottomless abyss. The energy shot upwards, fusing into a pillar. There was a crackle of electricity, and then a bolt of lightning tore through the sky. It contained purifying properties, a natural nemesis against spiritual energy. Stephen couldn't bring his weapons into this space, so he had to rely on his martial arts alone. He gathered his inner energy and unleashed balls of fire into the air. The lightning struck the fire, and shockwaves swept the air. The dragon wasn't shaken, but Stephen was blown left and right. Humans are pitifully weak. You won't be able to hold on for long. The dragon's tone was full of pity, but there was an underlying hint of excitement. A long time had passed since its last flight with a martial artist. Staying here by itself for thousands of years was lonelier than any human could ever imagine. When the lightning disappeared, Stephen casted his domain of hellfire. With him at the center, the pale blue flame spread across the dragon's scales. The fire wasn't hot, but it had to absorb the opponent's energy to sustain itself. Just when Stephen was about to take a breather, he realized that the flames couldn't break through the exterior of the scales. The flames flickered and waned. Before he could do anything else, spheres of light surrounded him. They condensed into 9 smaller dragons. With a roar, they charged at him. Their attacks were fierce but simple. Apart from their sharp claws and teeth, they released streams of energy from their mouths. If that was all there was to it, Stephen could have easily dodged. But the problem was, the dragons were fast, and he was outnumbered. The more he fought, the faster his inner energy drained. Stephen regretted his decision to enter the totem without thinking it through. Dragons were outside of a human's league. If he used all of the skills he had and still couldn't turn the situation around, this would end in his crushing defeat. His last resort was the Killen's phantom. In some ways, it could be considered a mutated dragon. Hopefully, it'd be evenly matched with the ice dragon. When Stephen condensed a flaming phantom of the Killen, a voice sounded in his head. "Mr. Adams, are you in danger?" He looked around in alarm. "Who are you?" "I'm the consciousness of the Killen's core. The core contains a separate consciousness from the beast itself. Humans call existences like me a remnant thought. Under normal circumstances, we can't communicate directly, but this place is special. You've discarded your body and separated your spiritual will. This allows you to bypass the constraints of your body and sense my existence." Stephen didn't have time to process the deeper meaning of what this entailed. He infused more of his inner energy into the Killen. It slashed at the dragon with its claws, and its tail swept the skies like a steel whip. A human and a beast fighting together could win most battles, but not when they were up against 9 other beasts. The battle was ear-piercing, but the damage wasn't fatal. The dragons regained their bearings and charged again. Stephen formed a thought in his mind. "We can't go on like this. Should we run?" "Calm down. Restrict their movements, and I'll take care of the rest." Stephen did as he was told. He accumulated the energy from the Killen into a layer of flames on his skin. He transformed them into chains and used them to bind the dragon's limbs. The depths below were hazy, but the skies above were enclosed. The space was too narrow for the dragons to dodge. Soon they were entangled in the chains of fire. The Killen seized the chance to sink its teeth into 2 of the dragon's necks and absorb their energy. This was a display of a wild beast's instincts. Consuming their prey was how they increased their strength. The 2 dragons were sucked dry. They vanished, and the Killen grew bigger. The ice dragon was focused on the trial in the crater. After Stephen left off its back and hovered in the air using his inner energy, it had stopped paying attention to him. It was confident that the 9 dragons were more than enough to deal with 1 puny human. "Good work," Stephen praised. "There's 7 of them left." "Don't worry, I'll end the battle as soon as possible," the Killen promised. They began to hunt down the remaining dragons. The Killen's tail coiled around them, preventing them from struggling. When they retaliated, the Killen took their attacks directly. Its body was sturdy, but there was no damage. After 100 moves, all 9 dragons were eliminated. "You're incredible. Can I bring you back to the real world?" Stephen asked. "Technically, I already exist. It's just that you were never able to communicate before. But yes, it's possible. It depends on your body's endurance. You're at the intermediate stages of the immortal realm, so you shouldn't be too far off. Stephen's misfortune had become an unexpected opportunity. He condensed the essence of the 9 dragons into a large sword and sprinted into the ice dragon's direction. It focused on the trial outside, and it didn't sense the incoming danger. Stephen's sword pierced the dragon's head, but only 3 inches deep. Its skull was hard, and it wasn't that easy to penetrate. He murmured an incantation. The roots extended from the tip of the sword. They latched onto the dragon's skull and spread rapidly. The roots extracted its energy and searched for the weakest part of the skull to break through. The ice dragon's consciousness finally returned to the mysterious space. This time, it was determined to kill Stephen with its own hands. Unfortunately, the dragon was massive, and it wasn't that flexible. The roots were wrapping around its skull and extending outside the wound, securing its head in place. The dragon roared in anger, twisting its body and attempting to throw Stephen off. Don't waste your energy. Despite the way you look, you're simple-minded. Your size is the only thing going for you. Give up! Stephen leaped to the side of the dragon's head where its skull was the weakest and pierced through the scales. The killin's claws exerted force on the hilt. With them working together, the skull cracked and the dragon's eyes dimmed. Its life force was rapidly depleting. Stephen's back was drenched in sweat. It had been some time since his last life-and-death battle, and he'd won through sheer luck. I'm going inside its skull. Be careful, the killin warned. I'll stay here and keep watch. Stephen turned himself into a swirl of light and entered the skull through the sword. The dragon's life force was weak, but it wasn't dead yet. It watched helplessly as Stephen's spiritual energy occupied its body. It was too weak to resist. Stephen turned back into its original form. He reached out and touched the pale blue ball of light. Chains made of energy extended from his fingers and bound the light tightly. If the dragon wanted to perish with him, that wouldn't be possible now. After living for thousands of years, the ice dragon was prepared to meet its end. If you're going to kill me, then do it. Don't waste my time. The ice dragon was one of the strongest beasts Stephen had ever encountered. It would be a waste to kill it. The dragon was the guardian of the Tribulation sect. It might be able to change its affiliation and take on a new master. There's no grudge between us, Stephen said tentatively. I don't want to fight to the death. The Tribulation sect is a radical faction that will do just about anything to achieve their goals. There's no future for you if you continue to follow them. The ice dragon didn't give in, even though Stephen held its life in his grasp. The head of the Tribulation sect, Augustus, in comparison, Stephen was far inferior. Surrendering is an insult to my dignity. I was distracted and you took advantage of that. You're only at the immortal realm. You're not qualified to be my master. Stephen was also stubborn. No one has absolute authority. We are all subjected to the laws of the heavens. If you follow me, I guarantee you'll live a better life. You don't want to stay here by yourself forever and be used on a whim by a radical faction, do you? He used more of his inner energy to make the roots extend into the depths of the dragon's brain. The pain would be unimaginable. To make sure the dragon's vitality wasn't extinguished, he transferred some of his energy into the ball of light. Before the founder of the Tribulation sect came along, the ice dragon rarely came in contact with humans. The founder had subdued it using his strength, forcing it to sign a contract. After a painful struggle, the colossal ice dragon finally yielded to Stephen. All right. From now on, we're allies. Happy now? Get rid of the roots. Welcome to my team. Stephen set up a blood contract in his mind and officially signed a master-servant relationship with the dragon. The sword in the skull disappeared, leaving a ghastly wound behind. Will you be able to heal? It'll take a long time. I was almost killed just now. The trial was ongoing outside. Stephen didn't have time to wait. He retracted the killin back into his body and left the ice dragon's spiritual world. The Leviathan unit's leader was waiting anxiously in the ravine. The saber-toothed tiger was curled around him and Stephen, hiding them from the Tribulation sect. He was relieved when life returned to Stephen's body. I'm glad you're back. What happened inside? There's no time to explain. Give me all the pills you have on you." The Leviathan unit's leader unscrewed a porcelain bottle and poured a wide assortment of medicinal pills into Stephen's palm. Stephen clenched his fist and turned the pills into powder. He tossed them onto the totem. The dragon's spiritual world was connected to the outside, and the healing effect of the pills seeped into its body. 10 minutes later, a blue ball of light appeared in front of Stephen. It flickered and shifted into a miniature version of its original form. "Thank you for saving me. What are you planning to do now?" The Leviathan unit's leader was in disbelief. Stephen never failed to surprise him. He'd subdued the guardian beast of the Tribulation sect. If they had a direct confrontation with Augustus, they would be guaranteed a safe escape with the Ice Dragon's help. Stephen pointed at the black-robed members below. "Can you summon more of your puppets?" The Ice Dragon understood his intention. "If you want to deal with them, I have a simpler method. I can influence their mental energy and make them lose their minds." A black mist seeped through the cracks at the bottom of the crater. The black-robed members didn't notice anything unusual. The mist contaminated their bodies, and their attacks became more aggressive. The killing was the only thought they had, and they sought to destroy everything in their path. The dragon shifted into a ball of light, and Stephen placed it inside his body. He mounted the saber-toothed tiger with the Leviathan unit's leader and headed south. At the edge of the crater, Augustus was chatting and laughing with the rest of the Tribulation sect. This was a trial to select candidates for a cardinal position. He's forbidden the Black Robe members from killing each other, but bloodshed would help eliminate the members with mediocre aptitudes and ensure the survival of the strong. Ezra was standing not too far away. He received a message from Stephen, notifying him that a long-range missile had locked onto the crater and telling him to run as far as he could. The tiger raced across the snowy plains in the darkness of the night. On the way back to the northeastern border, Stephen contacted the fleet near the Verglis Strait. "I've sent you the coordinates. Fire immediately after 2 minutes." "Understood," the captain replied. "What should we do about Scotty? Launching a missile on their territory is considered a provocation. If they rally an army and send them to the northern border, our hostile neighboring countries might get involved." Stephen was more concerned about the Tribulation sect wreaking havoc in the U.S. rather than another conflict breaking out at the northern border. They'd deal with the multi-country allied army once before, and they could do it again. But if they missed the opportunity and let the Tribulation sect go, a relentless and maniacal thorn in their side was in store for them for years to come. "I've informed our diplomats to make a trip to Scotty and apologize. It doesn't matter if they demand a large monetary or complicated compensation. We'll deal with that later." The captain acknowledged Stephen's order and launched the missile. It streaked across the sky like a meteor. This was the true potential of the United States' naval forces, and it was nowhere near the same level as a battle between martial artists. The flaming projectile descended from the sky over the crater below. The spectators didn't have a chance to process the incoming disaster before they were met with a calamity. The missile was more powerful than the talisman's destructive ability. The freezing crater was turned into a volcano. The frenzied Black Robe members were wiped out. The spectators at the edge of the crater didn't fare much better. They were annihilated. The moment Ezra caught sight of the missile, he calculated its speed and trajectory and ran into the distance without wasting any time. He barely managed to avoid the range of impact before the missile hit. An intense shockwave crashed into him, knocking him face first into the snow. He sat up with a cough, brushing the snow from his face. Stephen was surprisingly aggressive and destructive when push came to shove. If it weren't for his biochemical body, he would have been killed by the shockwave. Ezra looked around. The Tribulation sect was nowhere in sight. Maybe all of the members had perished together. He didn't know, and he didn't care. His emotions didn't affect him in the same way it did to humans. The shockwave had almost crushed Ezra's body, and he'd sustained internal injuries. He laid on his side and closed his eyes. The chill of the snow numbed the sensation he understood to be pain. He brought his knees to his chest and curled into a ball, waiting for his healing ability to kick in. At dawn, Stephen and the Leviathan unit's leader made it back to the fortress at the northeastern border. The tension kept everyone awake all night. The commander of the military base was relieved to see the Sovereign safe and sound. "Welcome back, Mr. Adams. While we were waiting, we prepared a meal for you to warm up." Stephen noticed that not all of their concerns had dissipated, so he tried to reassure them. "You don't have to worry so much. What matters is that we're back." Stephen and the Leviathan unit's leader headed to the restaurant. The commander trailed after them to accompany them. There was nothing like a hot pot to soothe the soul when the weather was cold. A pot of soup was boiling at the center of the table, and rolls of meat were served on a platter. Stephen was satisfied with the quality of the meal. "This isn't a one-time thing, right? Does your team have access to meals like these?" "Yes," the commander replied. "Our supplies are enough to guarantee everyone's living standards." Stephen instructed the staff to bring out herbs for him and the Leviathan unit's leader to speed up their recovery. Priceless herbs like ginseng, snow lotus, wolfberry, and more were tossed into the hot pot. The chill of the snowy plains was washed away as they ate. The sky was covered in gray clouds after the blizzard stopped. A relaxing atmosphere settled at the fortress from the serenity of the scenery. Their peace was disrupted when one of the personnel came to report to Stephen. "Scotty has designated its territory a no-fly zone. Our diplomats aren't allowed to enter the country." "Why? They notified Scotty of their arrival beforehand." "They said there's a risk of war breaking out and sent a team to the northeastern border to negotiate." In the middle of the night, a missile had bombarded Scotty's western territory, and their higher-ups were furious. If the United States' diplomats didn't come up with an excuse to schedule negotiations in advance, Scotty would have sent out thousands of troops to suppress the border. Stephen swirled the glass of wine in his hand. Scotty's diplomats were here to denounce him, and he would have no choice but to smile and lower his head. The commander of the military base didn't dare to utter a word. He'd seen this coming. 2 hours later, Scotty's military aircraft landed on the border. The representatives of their negotiation team entered the fortress accompanied by more than a dozen of his followers. "Mr. Sovereign, it's unfortunate that you're here. I'm assuming you're prepared to take full responsibility for the United States' actions." "There's nothing to worry about," Stephen said with a smile. "It was a minor accident." Scotty's representative was an experienced commander who'd served in the army for decades. He'd been through all kinds of battles, and his chances of coming out on top during negotiations were high. "We don't want to hear excuses. Even if this was an accident, who's to say this won't happen again?" "We weren't threatening Scotty. We were tracking our enemies, and the missile went off course. This situation is unexpected for us as well. We'd like to express our sincere apologies and offer compensation." When it came down to it, negotiations typically resolved around monetary compensation. The missile didn't cause Scotty any economic losses, and eradicating the tribulation sect was as beneficial to them as it was to the U.S. Scotty wasn't even aware that a radical religious faction was expanding their influence in their uninhabited territory without permission. In a way, the missile had done them a favor. The snowy plains were an undeveloped area. Stephen sincerely invited Scotty to set up trading companies at Cadis's port. With the 3 countries working together, Cadis's prosperity would soon be restored, and it would also make the hostile neighboring countries more cautious. They'd have to think twice before starting a conflict. Scotty's representative was interested, and the negotiations went much smoother. Stephen was quite familiar with Scotty's economic structure. Their energy and heavy industries had developed well, but their territory was located at a higher latitude. The cold climate wasn't suitable for growing crops. A certain proportion of food and light industrial raw materials had to be imported. If negotiations went well, this would become a portion of the United States' foreign capital. Stephen had also agreed to the proposed compensation. "If we maintain a long-term and stable partnership, it'll help us resist economic pressure from Warhawk and other countries." Scotty's representative nodded. "For us to reach Cadis, we'll have to cross the northeastern region of the U.S. With our partnership, I hope this route will open to Scotty and our people will be protected." "We'll guarantee your citizens' safety," Stephen promised. The negotiations ended on a high note, and both parties pretended like the missile never happened. Reconnaissance satellites from other countries had captured footage of the missile bombarding Scotty's western territory. This gave rise to all sorts of rumors. Media outlets claimed that the U.S. and Scotty were engaged in a conflict at the border, and a large-scale war was on the verge of breaking out. The price of corporate shares plummeted, while the price for war supplies soared. The rumors were reversed relatively quickly. 24 hours later, Scotty and the United States' official media outlets made a public announcement. The missile was a joint combat drill held by both of the countries to verify the performance of their new weaponry. It was an overwhelming success, and it had established a foundation of cooperation through the military and trade. To prevent delays, Scotty's representative led his team to Cadiz for an inspection. The king had no say, even though it was a big matter, because the sovereign called the shots. Javon drank alone in the palace as Scotty's team hustled here and there at the port. The officials tried to persuade him. "If you don't think this is appropriate, why don't you discuss this with the sovereign? Even if he's powerful, he can't force us to make a deal." Javon set his glass on the table. "What excuse do we have to reject it? Scotty is here for legal business and investment. It won't take long for them to carry out projects like the U.S. did." Another official stepped forward to express his opinion. "To restrict powerful countries like Scotty and the U.S., we'll have to use an out-of-the-box method. We could propose a business deal with Warhawk and Maplewood and purchase weapons and equipment from them. The close arms trade will facilitate an alliance between our countries, and they'll back us up in sticky situations whenever the U.S. and Scotty are involved." Cadiz had paid the U.S. over $100 billion. Was. Even so, he couldn't let the U.S. volunteer Cadiz's territory for free. "We can build a dock to our coastal island nearby to maintain the supply of the ships that come and go from Scotty and the U.S., one of the officials suggested. "Then we'll invite Warhawk and Maplewood's representatives to our country for a business deal and spin the conditions in our favor. They won't care too much about the minor losses because their priority is to balance the situation at our international waters." Javon thought this was reasonable. Cadiz's royal family had the right to conduct business with other countries. When the shockwaves from the missile died down and the flames in the crater were extinguished, Ezra returned to the area to conduct a search. He had to make sure the tribulation sect had been annihilated. If anyone escaped, they had become a hidden threat to the U.S. Everything within 60 miles of the crater had been scorched. The frozen earth and the snow accumulating from the blizzard over the past few days had disappeared. Ezra was both impressed and frustrated with the destructive potential of the missile. Charred remains were strewn haphazardly on the ground, and he couldn't identify any of them. He also couldn't bring the many samples to the Research Institute for analysis and investigation. Ezra circled the edge of the crater several times, but there were no new discoveries. He'd hit a dead end, so there was nothing left for him to do except report his non-existent findings to Stephen. He sent a message to his phone. "The missile destroyed the entire crater. I haven't found any survivors. What would you like me to do next?" Stephen's reply came minutes later. "Go back to the ice castle and meet up with your team. Search the castle for anything valuable. See if you can find anything related to the sacred manual. I'll send a team to assist you." The distance wasn't a problem for Ezra. He ran at full speed toward the ice castle. Most of the tribulation sect had perished from the missile. The only ones left were the guards who hadn't participated in the trial. They'd seen the latest news from the media and split up in their haste to escape. They were afraid that the U.S. and Scotty would join forces to get rid of them. Ezra was searching the perimeter of the castle when a helicopter landed. The commander of the military base had sent his subordinates to assist him. They greeted Ezra when they saw him. "Did you find anything yet?" "Not yet. There's a lot of talismans, but there's nothing related to the sacred manual." They swept the area as a team. Aside from talismans, they found a collection of martial arts manuals. The guard who'd escaped had probably taken the sacred manual fragment with them when they ran, which means that the tribulation sect hadn't been completely eradicated. Ezra, the undercover prisoners, and the team from the military base transported everything of value onto the helicopter. The wealth that the tribulation sect had accumulated for thousands of years fell into the United States' hands. Before they left, they destroyed the ice castle, officially putting an end to the headquarters of the tribulation sect. Stephen had one less thing to worry about, but he didn't have much time to relax. He still had to take care of the issue at Phantasma Isle. There were many secrets yet to be discovered on the vast island. With an endless supply of canned food, meat, and liquor, Ash and Red had successfully joined forces with the orcs. Stephen contacted them using a satellite phone. "You've been on the island for a while. Did you find anything important?" "The orcs found the ancient faction's treasure vault," Ash replied. "But there's a powerful defensive array in place. They haven't found a way to break it yet." During the past few days, the orcs had tried everything to force their way inside. They blew up the area, and dust flew everywhere, but it had no effect on the array. The strength of the ancient faction that used to live on the island was evident from the array surrounding the island when it was at the bottom of the sea. One explosion had almost wiped out Warhawk and Maplewood's fleet. If these orcs keep trying, they might set off another explosion and follow the same fate. "Keep an eye on them," Stephen instructed. "I'll be there with my people soon." "Okay," Ash said. "We have an abundance of food on the ship to maintain our friendship." Stephen ended the call and asked the Leviathan unit's intelligence team to come to his office. It had been a long time since he'd heard from Tristan and Zane. They were investigating the Northern European and African teams, but they seemed to have vanished into thin air. The intelligence team was at a loss. Tristan brought a communication device with him before he left, but were only able to determine his location using the signal if he's within our borders. If he leaves the country, satellite communications will be blocked or restricted. We haven't been able to track his signal for some time now. There's a possibility that his communication device was destroyed in battle. Tristan was an expert thief, especially where treasures were involved. Not even a defensive array could stop him. The problem was he'd gone missing, and no one knew how to find him. "Where was his signal the last time it appeared?" Stephen asked. "He was at the southern border. From the direction he was heading, we believe his destination was Garan." Stephen dismissed the Leviathan unit and materialized the illusory pearls. He placed them on his desk in sequence. The 7 gems were a gift from Tristan. Aside from its function as a weapon in battle, it had a lot of other features. The gems shuffled on the desk into the position of the Big Dipper. They shone brightly, casting a colorful cascade of light over the walls and windows. Stephen didn't know how to operate the illusory pearls to its full potential, but he carefully transmitted his inner energy into the gems and willed them to search for Tristan's location. The gems shone brighter and reflected a blurry image like a projector. Tristan's voice echoed in the office. "Took you long enough. You finally figured out one of the illusory pearl's hidden features." Stephen scoffed. "You've been off the radar for so long, I was beginning to think you died in a corner somewhere." "In this world, who could possibly threaten me?" Tristan was always the same. Every other sentence was him bragging. Maybe it was because he was far away, but the projection of him wasn't that clear. Stephen cut to the chase and told him about Phantasma Isle. "If you two don't have any leads, come back for a treasure hunt." Tristan's interest was piqued. "What treasure?" "We found a treasure vault belonging to an ancient martial arts faction. If you two don't come back soon, the orcs will take it away." "What? We're coming back right now. Wait for us." Tristan and Zane had followed the mysterious Northern European and African teams to a region outside the U.S. They had some understanding of their backer, but they weren't confident that they could get rid of them all. Their backer was an ancient martial arts faction called Tempest Citadel, and they were much stronger than the Tribulation sect. During ancient times, a majority of their members were Ascenders. Stephen estimated that Tristan and Zane would need a few days to return to Annapolis. He had some free time to deal with other things, like the 7 Stars prison. The prisoners had broken out twice already. He didn't know if this was because the enemy was too strong, or if their security was lacking. Either way, he wanted to assess the reconstruction with his own eyes. The military had designated the remote mountain forest as a restricted area. Stephen spotted the armed guards at the sentry post preparing for the patrol as he drove past. He revealed his identity at the gate at the end of the tunnel and went into the prison to do a quick sweep of the area. The reconstruction was going well, and there was nothing he needed to do. He was in and out faster than he'd expected, so he decided to visit the research institute not too far away. Dr. Dalton was in the process of expanding the lab, hoping to replicate the facilities on Mirage Island. While he was introducing Stephen to his new projects, Ezra entered the room. He was returning from Scotty's snowy plains. He went up to Stephen when he saw him. "Mr. Adams, is there anything else you'd like me to do?" "I'm going out to sea soon, and you need to come with me. You did a great job in Scotty." Ezra experienced emotions on a different scale from humans. Stephen's compliment didn't mean anything to him, but he understood how to respond like a human. He nodded slightly. "Thank you." Dr. Dalton opened the glass container, and Ezra went inside and laid down. A nutrient solution filled the interior. This would give the cells in Ezra's body two unique features: memory and absorption. The damage he sustained during battle was recorded, and when he recovered, his body would be strengthened. In other words, the more battles he experienced, the stronger he would become. Dr. Dalton adjusted the parameters on the screen before opening the safe and taking out two exquisite watches. He handed them to Stephen. "This is for you and Ezra. It's a miniature version of the device placed beneath the arena during the martial arts competition. It can absorb your opponent's inner energy and convert it into a harmless state, which will then enter your body." "So if the battle drags out, does that mean my opponents will tire themselves out?" "That could happen, but there's a limit to how much energy the watch can absorb. Save it for critical moments." Tristan and Zane arrived in Annapolis just as the sun was rising. It was much faster than Stephen had expected. No hurdle or obstacle could stop Tristan when the treasure was involved. "Let's go. How much longer do we have to wait?" Stephen looked at Tristan, who was practically glowing, and then at Zane, who looked worse for wear. His hair was windswept, and his uniform was wrinkled. It looked like he'd experienced the 4 seasons and braved the sun, wind, rain, and snow just to get here in less than a day. Tristan must have dragged him halfway across the country. "Don't you want to rest first?" Stephen asked. He directed the question at Tristan, but it was more for Zane. Tristan gave him an impatient and pointed look. "Time is money. If we don't go now, the vault could be empty by the time we get there." Out of concern for Zane's well-being, Stephen managed to convince Tristan to settle down and wait an hour or two before they left. Tristan sat down with reluctance written all over his face, while Zane was more than relieved to be able to finally take a breather. The secretary brought out tea and snacks into the room as they gathered on the couches. Stephen took the opportunity to ask them how the investigation went. They'd been tracking the Northern European and African teams ever since the end of the competition. "They're affiliated with an ancient martial arts faction called Tempest Citadel," Tristan said. Back then, the term ascenders typically referred to true immortal martial artists. Tempest Citadel has been hunting ascenders ever since ancient times. "What's their goal?" Stephen couldn't understand why Tempest Citadel would go after martial artists who'd reached the peak of their cultivation. Ascenders were powerful, and most people hesitated to make an enemy out of them. Somehow, Tempest Citadel had avoided an untimely end and had been operating in secret for thousands of years.